In Chicago's busy courthouse, Renee Carter, a poised black woman in a sleek gray suit, stepped in for a routine hearing, expecting quick justice against rogue cops. Judge Harold Vance, a silver-haired relic, smirked. Another charity case, mocking her as she approached, papers scattering under his scorn. She flashed her USSS badge, Special Agent Carter, and he froze, arrogance cracking. A power shift sparked, but his venom surged. What ruthless blow would he strike to crush this agent who dared defy him? A move that'd haunt her career forever. Before we dive into this wild showdown, tell us where you're watching from. Vilif, you're fired up for justice over bias. Hit like, subscribe, and join us. Let's expose the truth together. The Chicago courtroom pulsed with a crisp morning chill as Renee Carter stood firm beneath the high-ceiling's stark fluorescent lights, her tailored gray suit sharp against her deep brown skin, the faint scent of pressed cotton and determination rising from the fabric as she faced the bench, her polished flats rooted to the worn oak floor, a slim folder of misconduct evidence gripped in her steady hands, a case against rogue cops so tight she could feel the scales tipping in her favor, and the gallery buzzed behind her, a restless tide of faces stretching wall to wall, lawyers in faded ties whispering over dog-eared briefs, clerks shuffling files with a rhythm like a heartbeat, and spectators shifting on creaky pews, their murmurs a low hum beneath the groan of old wood, the air thick with the musty tang of dust and anticipation, a stage set for her to confront. Injustice head-on, a moment 32 years of grit had built her for, from Chicago's toughest streets to the elite ranks of the United States Secret Service. Judge Harold Vance loomed above her, a wiry figure perched on his elevated throne, his silver hair swept back in a thinning wave, his pale skin stretched tight over hollow cheekbones, his black robe swallowing the light as his gavel rested heavy on its block, a silent menace gleaming under the flickering tubes, and his pale gray eyes glinted with a cold disdain that prickled her neck. His presence a wall of icy contempt, a relic of a system that thrived on silencing voices like hers and Renee's. Pulse steadied, her jaw firm. Because this wasn't just a judge, this was a gatekeeper, itching to slam the door on her every word, a man whose 60 years had calcified into a monument of prejudice. He leaned forward, bony fingers adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. "State your purpose," his voice barking out, sharp and dripping with scorn that cut through the courtroom's hum, and Renee stepped up, her spine rigid. "Special Agent Renee Carter, United States Secret Service, here on a misconduct charge against Officers Pratt and Dunn," her words crisp, polished, a shield forged from years of training and resolve. But Vance cut her off, his lips curling into a sneer. "Misconduct, huh? Typical excuse." His dismissal, a thunderclap, tossing her credentials aside like refuse, and Nia's eyes narrowed, stepping beside her sister. "We've got dashcam footage, excessive force," her tone steady, unwavering, slapping the folder onto the defendant's table with a thud that echoed off the oak-paneled walls. A stack of video stills and reports so damning it could bury Pratt's smug grin, and she added, "This proves it," her defiance a blade slicing through his mockery, because 32 years of battling bias had taught her to stand tall when men like him tried to diminish her, and she wouldn't flinch, not here, not now. Vance's sneer deepened, his pale hands folding over the bench. Irrelevant, his ruling booming, a gavel's echo without the strike, his voice thick with a condescension that made Renee's stomach twist, and he waved a dismissive hand. "You're wasting my time with this nonsense," smirking as a ripple of chuckles rolled from the back, where cops in starched blues lounged against the wall, their faces split with grins. "She's dreaming," one muttered, his partner snorting. "Thinks she's special." Their bias a wall of sound crashing over her, and Renee's fingers clenched around her badge, the metal cool against her palm, because this wasn't about evidence. It was about the rich brown of her skin, the tight curls framing her face, the audacity of daring to challenge in a room that wasn't built for her. And Vance leaned back. "Fancy nonsense won't sway me," his taunt a jab, because her case, her proof, meant nothing against his hate, a first humiliation landing like a slap across her face, stripping her stand bare. Renee's jaw ticked, her voice rising. "Your Honor, this footage shows brutality, it's undeniable." Her words a lifeline hurled into the storm, pointing to the folder, its edges crisp despite the tension, each frame a nail in the copse. "Coffin?" and she added, "Witnesses corroborate it." Her tone sharp, a plea for reason in a tide of scorn, because she'd spent months building this, nights analyzing tapes, days tracking victims, a case that could have been her triumph, her proof she belonged. And Vance's lips pursed. "I don't see the relevance." His lie slick, unwavering, his gavel hovering as if tasting her defeat. And the gallery's murmurs swelled, lawyers glancing at each other, clerks pausing. Mid-shuffle, a young black clerk, Miss Lena, her braids tucked under a cap, muttering, "She's right," her voice a lifeline smothered by the cop's jeers. "Let her flop." Their laughter a wave drowning her whisper, because Vance's power, his whiteness, trumped her truth. And Renee's breath hitched, her chest burning, because her stand, her fight, was faltering under his glare, a wind she'd tasted slipping through her fingers. Vance banged the gavel once, the crack slicing the buzz. "Enough, I've heard plenty." His order final, tossing her opening like scraps, and Pratt's defense attorney, a wiry white man named Greg Holt with a slick comb-over and a smug grin, leaned back, arms crossed. "No case here." His drawl lazy, unchallenged, because Vance's bench was his stage, and Renee shouted, "This is prejudice," her voice cracking the room's haze, but Vance's gavel crashed again. Silence. "Or you're out." His snarl a blade, and Nia gripped her shoulder. "We'll regroup." Her whisper fierce, because this wasn't just a loss, it was a public shaming. Her badge mocked, her evidence dismissed, and cops grinned. "Know your place." Their taunt a gut punch, because 32 years of clawing up had taught her to rise. But this blow landed hard, a war igniting against a judge who'd never let her breathe, a first mockery chaining her to a fight she'd wage with every ounce of grit, because Vance's smirk, the gallery's jeers, hadn't killed her spark. They'd fueled it, sharpened it for a battle he couldn't foresee. The Chicago courthouse hallway thrummed with a tense midday chill as Renee Carter leaned against a scuffed marble pillar, her tailored gray suit now creased from Judge Harold Vance's venomous mockery in the courtroom moments ago, the faint scent of pressed cotton and resolve clinging to the fabric as she gripped her slim folder of dashcam footage, the pages still crisp despite his scornful dismissal, and Renee's jaw tightened, her deep brown eyes glinting with a fire that refused to flicker out. "I'll refile, he can't bury me yet." Her voice a low growl, slicing through the hum of footsteps and muted voices echoing off the cold stone walls, because 32 years of clawing through Chicago's roughest streets had taught her to rise when men like him tried to crush her, and she adjusted her badge, its USSS emblem cool against her palm, a lifeline she'd wield to crack his wall. Her footage intact, a spark she'd fan into flame despite the sting of his last blow, and she turned, striding back toward the courtroom, her polished flats clicking in a steady rhythm, papers clutched like a weapon in a war she'd just begun. The hallway buzzed with restless energy, clerks weaving through with carts groaning under file stacks, lawyers in rumpled collars arguing in hushed tones, their briefcases thudding against thighs, and sunlight slanted through tall windows, casting stark beams across the marble floor, a harsh glow that mocked the shadows she'd faced, and a young black clerk, Miss Ella, slipped from a side office, her navy blouse crisp, her tight braids tucked neatly under a cap, her eyes darting as she approached. "He's crooked, Vance," her whisper sharp, pressing a folded police report into Renee's hand, its edges worn but ink clear, detailing payoffs from officers. Pratt and Dunn to Vance, dates and sums a smoking gun, and Renee's breath hitched. "This changes it all," her fingers tracing the paper, a lifeline plucked from the courthouse's underbelly, because Ella's risk, her truth, was a crack in Vance's fortress, a chance to reclaim her case from his racist grip, to nail Pratt and prove she belonged, and she squared her shoulders. "I'm back in," her hope surging, marching toward the courtroom, the report a torch in the gloom. The courtroom doors swung open, the gallery's buzz swelling as she crossed the threshold. A sea of faces stretching to the walls, reporters scribbling on pads, their pens scratching like anxious beetles, spectators shifting on pews. Their murmurs a low tide beneath the creak of old oak, and Vance loomed on his bench, a wiry figure with silver hair swept back in a thinning wave, his pale skin taut over hollow cheekbones, his watery blue eyes narrowing as Renee stepped up. "Your Honor, new evidence," her voice booming, slapping the police report onto the defendant's table with a thud that rippled through the oak-paneled room, and she added, "It ties Pratt and Dunn to you." Her accusation sharp, a blade aimed at his core, because 32 years of battling bias had taught her to strike when the iron glowed hot, and the gallery hushed, reporters pausing mid-note, clerks leaning forward, a flicker of victory shimmering as Vance's gavel wavered, his lips pursing, a crack in his icy facade, a win she could almost grasp, freedom from his scorn pulsing within reach. But Vance smirked, a predator's gleam flashing across his thin lips, signaling Officer Pratt, a wiry cop with a buzz cut and a sneer etched deep, lounging by the witness stand. "Inspect it." His order clipped, casual, and Pratt sauntered over, his boots scuffing the hardwood, clutching a plastic cup of water, its surface glistening in the fluorescent light, and he stumbled, his elbow jerking, the clear liquid splashing across the report, soaking the pages, ink bleeding into a soggy smear. Clumsy me, his grin a jagged blade, his pale eyes glinting with mock apology, and Renee lunged, "You son of a—" Her shout raw, snatching at the papers, but Vance's gavel crashed. Ruined, out, his ruling a thunderclap, his voice slick with triumph, tossing her proof aside like trash, and Renee's fists clenched. That was deliberate, her cry fierce, cracking the room's stillness because her spark, her lifeline, drowned in water and scorn, a sabotage, so blatant it seared, and Vance leaned back, no evidence, no case, his smirk widening. A brutal lesson in how racism's hand could erase truth with a flick of a wrist, chaining her to defeat once more. The gallery erupted, white-suited lawyers chuckling. Waste of time, their jeers a wave crashing over her, cops at the back grinning. Told you she'd flop. Their bias a wall of sound, and outside, protesters' chants swelled through. The tall windows, justice for Renee, a chorus of hope ringing clear. But inside it faded, drowned by Vance's gavel. "Next case," his order final, slamming the door on her fight, and Renee's knees shook. "I had him," her whisper breaking, papers slipping from her grip, sodden and useless, a win she'd tasted dissolving in an instant. And she gripped. "The table. I'll find more," her defiance a thread because 32 years of grit had taught her to regroup. But this blow landed harder. A war deepening against a judge who'd never let her breathe. And the courtroom settled, Vance's pale eyes glinting, cops sneering. Back to the streets, Pratt's taunt a gut punch, because her proof, her stand had faltered. Evidence drowned? Racism's sabotage burying her spark in a heartbeat, yet not dead because Vance's smirk, Pratt's grin, hadn't killed her fight. They'd fueled it, sharpened it for a battle he couldn't foresee. When a judge's scorn drowns, truth in a racist flood, how do you fight on? Comment number 1 if you're stunned. Vance torched Renee's proof with a smirk. Hit that like button and subscribe for more raw justice battles. Let's keep the fire burning. Now picture Renee taking her fight to the streets. Voice rising, will defiance crack Vance's grip, or will his next trap sink her deeper? Don't blink, the storm's about to break. The Chicago streets pulsed with a biting dusk wind as Renee Carter stood defiant outside the towering courthouse. Her tailored gray suit now creased and damp from the courtroom's earlier sabotage, the faint scent of pressed cotton and resolve, clinging to the fabric as she gripped a megaphone tight in her steady hands, its cold metal a lifeline against the fading light, and her voice boomed, "Open the files, show the truth," cutting through the chatter of commuters and the distant rumble of traffic, because 32 years of clawing through the city's toughest corners had taught her to fight when evidence drowned, and Renee's jaw clenched, her deep brown eyes blazing with a fire that refused to dim. "They can't silence us," her shout sharp, echoing off the granite facade, because Vance's racist grip couldn't bury her yet, not while breath still burned in her lungs, and she raised a sign high, "Justice for the brutalized," scrawled in bold black ink across weathered poster board, a spark she'd fan into, flame despite the sting of his last blow, and the crowd swelled, locals joining, fists pumping. "Free Renee!" a chorus rising against the system's heavy hand, a chance to reclaim her fight from his scornful shadow. The street thrummed with restless life, vendors peddling hot dogs from carts, their greasy aroma mingling with exhaust, office workers pausing mid-stride, phones out, snapping shots of René's stand, and a Fed in a navy jacket slipped through, his badge glinting as he leaned close. "Vance is dirty, we're probing," his whisper a crack in the dusk, a lifeline plucked from the chaos, and René's chest tightened. "It's working," her hope surging because her protest, her chance, had pulled eyes. Feds digging where Vance's gavel had buried truth, a win shimmering beyond the courthouse's looming bulk, a chance to nail Pratt and prove she belonged. And she nodded. He's going down, her defiance ablade, because 32 years of battling bias had taught her to seize sparks, to turn murmurs into roars, and the crowd thickened. "Expose Vance!" Their voices a tide, a spark she thought might shatter his reign at last. But Officer Pratt slunk through, a wiry figure in starched blue, his buzz cut glinting under streetlights, his pale eyes glinting with a predator's calm, and he slipped a small baggie of white powder into René's satchel, its plastic crinkling. As he stepped back, "Dealer," his shout booming over the chance, cuffing her wrists with a snap of steel that bit deep, drawing a thin trickle of blood, and René froze. "What?" Her cry raw, incredulous because their stand, their spark, had lit this fight. But Pratt's lie flipped it, a noose snapping tight, and she fought. "It's a setup," her voice sharp, swinging a fist, grazing Pratt's jaw, blood blooming on his lip. As he staggered, his yelp a jagged edge piercing the dusk, because 32 years of grit screamed to break free, even here, even now. Pratt clutched his face, assault resisting, his howl theatrical, blood streaking his chin, and cops swarmed from the shadows, their boots pounding pavement, hands clamping René's arms, yanking her wrists tighter, chains clanking as they dragged her toward a van. "You're under arrest," Pratt barked, his grin returning, blood staining his teeth, and Judge Harold Vance emerged from the courthouse steps, his silver hair a brittle crown, his pale skin taut, his pale gray eyes glinting with triumph. Assault, resisting, his lie booming, doubling charges with a flick of his bony wrist, and the crowd faltered. "No!" a protester shouted. Phones dropping, fists unclenching as cops shoved René inside, the van's doors slamming shut, colder, darker, because her protest, her fight, had sparked Fed. Probes, a win she'd tasted, only for Vance's claws to strike fiercer, deadlier, piling crimes she didn't commit, chaining her to a jail cell with every fabricated charge, and René's knees shook. "We were closer," her whisper breaking, blood trickling down her wrist, a brutal lesson in how racism's grip could twist defiance into despair, and she gripped the van's edge. "I'll get out." Her defiance a thread because 32 years of grit had taught her to rise, but this blow landed deeper, a war deepening against a judge who'd never let her breathe. And the van rolled, Vance's pale eyes glinting, cops sneering. "Know your place." Pratt's taunt a gut punch, because her badge, her stand had faltered, racism's trap burying. Her spark in an instant, yet not dead, because Vance's smirk, Pratt's lie, hadn't killed her fight, they'd fueled it, sharpened it for a battle he couldn't foresee. The Cook County Jail loomed under a grey dawn sky as René Carter stumbled from the transport van, its rusted frame creaking shut behind her, the air thick with the sour tang of sweat and the stale reek of despair, her orange jumpsuit chafing against wrists still raw from Pratt's cuffs, the coarse fabric itching where dampness clung to her skin, and her legs wobbled, bruised ribs pulsing with every shaky step across the cracked concrete yard, blood crusting her swollen lip from the street protest-turned ambush, a memory of Hayes's. Racist lies now chaining her to this hellhole, false assault and drug charges piling atop her fight, a brutal weight she'd never outrun. She shuffled through intake, a cavernous room with peeling grey walls and buzzing fluorescent strips, casting a harsh glare on grim-faced guards, their boots scuffing the linoleum as they barked orders, stripping her of her last threads of dignity, tossing her a threadbare blanket that stank of mildew and socks so worn they'd tear by noon, and a hulking guard with a shaved head and a jagged scar twisting down his cheek leaned close, his badge reading Pike, his breath hot with tobacco as he muttered, "Vance's problem, huh? his words slithering into her ears, chilling her despite the sweat trickling down her spine, because Vance's reach had followed her, a venomous whisper poisoning even this concrete abyss. And Renee's jaw tightened. "I'm innocent," her defiance sharp, but Pike smirked. "Not here," shoving her toward the yard, a sprawling dust pit ringed by sagging chain link, topped with coils of razor wire where inmates milled, their eyes glinting with predatory intent, sizing her up like meat on a butcher's slab. The gate clanged shut, locking her in, dust sticking to her damp skin as she scanned the expanse, the chill pressing down like a leaden fist, and inmates closed in, a trio stalking forward, their leader a broad woman with a shaved scalp and a scar slashing across her knuckles. Her fists clenched as she growled, "Heard you're Vance's pet?" Her voice a gravelly taunt, and Renee's stomach lurched, because Pike had spread his poison, painting her as a snitch or a mark, and she squared her shoulders. "I don't want trouble." Her tone steady, but the scarred woman laughed, a guttural rasp. "Trouble's your shadow now," and swung, her fist crashing into Renee's cheek, the crack splitting the yard's dull roar, sending her reeling, blood welling hot in her mouth as pain flared across her face, and Renee stumbled. "Back! Hoff!" Her shout raw, but the others pounced, one driving a heavy boot into her ribs, a sickening crunch ripping through her, and 32 years of scrapping in Chicago's toughest corners flared to life, her fist flying, slamming the scarred woman's nose, cartilage crumpling with a wet snap, blood streaming down her chin as she howled, staggering back, shock flashing in her muddy eyes, and Renee pivoted, ducking a wild swing from a wiry thug, with a tattoo snaking up her neck, driving her elbow into the woman's gut, air whooshing out as she doubled over, and the third froze, long enough for Renee to shove her hard, toppling her into the dirt, kicking up a gritty cloud that stung her eyes, a fleeting stand carved from grit and rage, because she wouldn't break, not here, not now. The yard hushed, inmates gaping, a grudging nod rippling through the crowd as the trio retreated, nursing their bruises, and Renee panted, wiping blood from her lip, thinking defiance might carve her a sliver of respect, a shield in this pit, until Pike strode over, his baton twirling, his smirk a slash of menace. "Told you she's trouble," his growl a whip, and he nodded to a wiry guard with a pinched face, who slipped a small metal shank into her bunk, its blade glinting under the harsh lights. "She attacked," Pike barked, his lie booming across the yard, and Renee's heart sank. "That's not mine." Her shout fierce, desperate, because jail was a weight, but this could chain her for years, and guards swarmed, pinning her arms, cuffs snapping tight again, biting deeper into her raw wrists, drawing a fresh trickle of blood. And Pike loomed. Add assault, 5 more years. His verdict a noose, because Vance's hate had stretched here, piling lies on lies, and the inmates' nods turned to sneers. "Snitch gets it," their whispers a tide burying her spark. A brutal lesson in how racism's grip sank deeper with every fight she waged. Then, a shadow slipped through. Ruby, a gaunt inmate with grey braids and tired eyes, her jumpsuit patched. At the knees, kneeling beside Renee's bunk. "You're not alone." Her whisper soft, a lifeline in the storm, and she pressed a battered flip phone into Renee's palm. "Call out, quick!" Her hands trembling as she darted back, and Renee's chest swelled. "Thank you." Her gratitude raw, dialing Dana, her sister's voice crackling through. "Renee, oh God!" Her sob breaking the line, and Renee whispered, "Vance framed me, help." Hope surging as Dana promised, "I'll get someone." A thread to pull her from this abyss, but footsteps pounded. Pike charging back, his face twisted. "What's that?" Snatching the phone as Ruby spun. "It's mine." Her lie bold, but Pike grabbed her, slamming her against the bunk, baton raining. Blows. Her cry sharp as blood bloomed on her cheek, and Renee lunged. "No!" Her shout useless, chains yanking her back, and Pike smashed the phone into shards, plastic crunching under his boot. "No escape, bitch!" His snarl a death knell, kicking. Ruby's crumpled form, her whimpers fading as guards dragged her off, leaving Renee kneeling in the dust, cheek pulsing, ribs screaming. Because she'd fought, carved a stand. Thought Ruby's gift might free her, but Vance's shadow stretched crueler, deadlier, turning her spark into ash, and the yard's silence pressed down, inmates scattering, the air thick with blood, and Loss because 32 years of grit had taught her to rise, but this blow landed deepest, a war deepening against a judge who'd never let her breathe. A spark buried in torment, yet not dead. Because Pike's lie, Ruby's blood, hadn't killed her fight, they'd fueled it, sharpened it for a battle he couldn't foresee. When a jailhouse beatdown buries hope under racist fists, how much can one woman take? Comment number 1 if you're shocked Pike crushed Renee's fight with a shank and a smirk. Hit that like button and subscribe for more raw tales of grit against hate. We're standing with her. Now, imagine a whistleblower stepping up, voice trembling. Will their truth break Renee free, or will Vance's fire burn hotter yet? Keep your eyes peeled, the next twist is coming fast. The Cook County Jail solitary cell squeezed Renee Carter like a damp fist, its slick concrete walls glistening faintly under a single bulb's weak flicker, the air thick with the musty tang of mold and the stale reek of despair. Her orange jumpsuit, stiff with dried blood and sweat, clinging to the bruises mottling her cheek and the cracked ribs pulsing beneath her chest, blood crusting her swollen lip from the jailhouse beatdown, and she slumped against the cold stone, her breath shallow, the ache a relentless drumbeat as she traced a jagged crack beside her with a trembling finger. The sting of Ruby's beating still raw in her ears, a brutal echo of Vance's reach locking her in this hellhole, her sentence now bloated by Pike's planted shank, chaining her to years she didn't deserve. Her busted elbow throbbed under a frayed sling, her wrists raw where cuffs had bitten, and she scraped at the crack, her nail chipping as she carved a plea into the rough surface. Vance framed me, each letter a jagged wound, her knuckles scraping bloody against the stone. A desperate flare scratched into the silence, because Ruby's shattered phone, her crumpled form, had lit a fire she wouldn't let die. And Renee's jaw tightened, her voice a hoarse whisper. Someone'll see. Her hope thin but fierce, because 32 years of clawing through Chicago's shadows had taught her to fight when the world turned its back. Even here, even now. Hours bled into a suffocating stillness, the bulb buzzing overhead, its sickly glow casting her shadow long and twisted across the gritty floor, and she nursed her ribs, each breath a sharp stab, until soft footsteps shuffled outside, a shadow. Pausing at the slot, Miss Fay, a stooped inmate with grey curls spilling from a faded cap, her lined face peering in, her eyes widening as she squinted at the scrawl, and Renee surged forward. "Miss Fay, look at the wall," her whisper urgent, cutting through the cell's gloom, and Fay froze, her gnarled hands clutching a broom, then leaned closer. "Lord, I heard about you," her voice trembling because she'd swept these halls long enough to catch whispers of Vance's hate, and she nodded. "I'll tell," her promise fragile but real, slipping a rag over the words, memorizing them as she scrubbed, then shuffled off, her broom swishing to mask her haste, and Renee's chest swelled, a spark igniting, because Fay's courage, Ruby's echo, was a bridge, a crack in this jail's iron grip, a chance to claw her way out from Vance's lies. Time crawled, the bulbs hum a relentless drone, until the next dusk when faint voices seeped beyond the cell, a TV blaring in the guard's lounge, Jamal, a gritty reporter with a voice like gravel, slicing through static. "Agent framed. By judge, sources allege corruption." And Renee's bruised lips curved. "Faye did it," her whisper triumphant, because the story hit Chicago's airwaves, protests erupting outside the jail gates, megaphones blaring, "Free Renee Carter," their chants rattling the razor wire, and she pressed her ear to the wall, the buzz of outrage filtering through, a lifeline she could almost grasp because the city was stirring, voices rising where hers couldn't, and she thought freedom might claw its way in, years peeling back with every shout beyond the concrete. A wind shimmering in the chaos, her fight fanning a city's flame. Then a bombshell dropped. Sam, Pike's jittery partner, a lanky kid with nervous hands and a mop of blonde curls, cracked on air, his voice shaking through the TV's crackle. "He paid me to plant it, frame her." And Renee's fist punched the air. "Yes," her cry muffled but fierce, because Sam's confession was gold. Proof Vance's empire was rotting, a spark swelling into a blaze, and she clung to the wall, ribs pulsing. "It's happening!" Her hope surging, because protests thickened, signs bobbing in sweaty crowds. Her sister Dana on screen pleading, "She's innocent." her voice a beacon piercing the dusk, and Renee whispered, "I'm out." Her defiance a thread. Because Faye's risk, Sam's break had lit a firestorm. Chicago roaring where her cell had silenced her, a chance to shatter Vance's grip, to reclaim her life from his racist cage. But the cell's hush deepened, the guard's lounge falling quiet, and heavy boots stomped closer, a shadow filling the slot. Vance himself, his wiry frame wedged in a suit, his silver hair stark under the hall's harsh lights, his pale grey eyes glinting with rage. "How you think you're smart?" His snarl low, venomous, and Renee's stomach plummeted. Because he shouldn't be here, not in this pit, but he was, and she stood. "You're scared." Her defiance a blade. Because his presence meant the story stung, and Vance smirked. "Scared? No, I run this town." His voice ice, turning as swiftly as he'd come, vanishing into the hall's gloom, leaving a chill in his wake, and minutes later the TV blared again. Jamal's boss cutting in, story retracted, unverified claims, his tone flat, scripted, and Renee's fists clenched. He bought them, her realization bitter, because Vance had stormed the newsroom, cash or threats dousing Jamal's. "Fire." And he appeared again, peering through the slot. "You'll rot, no one cares." His grin a slash of crooked teeth, and the door stayed shut, the bulb dimming as hope curdled because Faye's courage, Sam's leak, had lit a flare. Only for Vance's hate to snuff it, his power a vice tighter than ever, and Renee's fingers brushed the scrawl. "Vance framed me," still there. Unseen now, useless. And she sank beside it, ribs aching. "He's winning," her voice a thread, because 32 years of grit had taught her to rise. But this blow landed deeper, a war deepening against a judge who'd never let her breathe. A glimmer snuffed into ash, yet not dead, because Vance's smirk, the retraction, hadn't killed her fight. They'd fueled it, sharpened it for a battle he couldn't foresee. The Cook County jail yard crackled with a simmering dusk heat as Renee Carter shuffled back into general population, her orange jumpsuit stiff with crusted blood and sweat, clinging to the raw welts on her wrists and the fresh bruises mottling her jaw from Pike's brutal beatdown. Blood crusting her swollen lip as her cracked ribs throbbed beneath her chest with every halting step across the dusty concrete, her busted elbow pulsing under a frayed sling, the air thick with the sour tang of unwashed bodies and the faint hum of despair, a brutal weight chaining her to years stretched by Vance's lies and Pike's planted shank, 16 now, bloated by fabricated sins she'd never shed. The yard buzzed with a restless fury, inmates pacing like caged beasts under the flickering floodlights, their eyes glinting with a raw anger sparked by Sam's leaked confession, his words a ghost haunting their mutters. "Vance paid me." A crack in the jail's iron shell, and Renee's jaw tightened, her fingers brushing the welts, a stinging reminder of cuffs that had bitten deep. But she stood tall, 32 years of battling Chicago's shadows, fueling her resolve. Even broken, because Sam's betrayal of Vance had lit a fire, a fault line trembling through this concrete pit, ready to burst. Then it exploded, a scream slicing the dusk. They framed the agent, an inmate's cry igniting the yard, and chaos roared, women surging, trays crashing against chain link, fists smashing guard posts, the din swallowing the hum of cicadas beyond the razor wire, and Renee seized it. Spotting a guard's radio dangling from Pike's belt as he wrestled an inmate, her hand darting out, snatching it, the plastic slick with sweat, and she bolted, "Cover me!" Her shout, sharp, hoarse, weaving through the fray, ribs screaming. With every jolt, because 32 years of scrapping had taught her to grab chances, even bleeding, even here, and she pressed the button, voice crackling over static. "This is Renee Carter. Vance framed me." Her words a flare broadcasting beyond the walls, a desperate plea piercing the night, and inmates rallied. "Keep her clear," their shouts a chorus, because Sam's leak had lit this blaze, and now her voice fanned it, freedom shimmering. On the horizon, a spark she could taste through the copper in her mouth. Chicago erupted, protesters flooding the jail gates, horns blaring. "Free Renee," their chants shaking the chain link, news vans clogging the streets, Jamal's voice booming again. Jail riot escalates over judge corruption, and Renee's chest swelled. "They're listening," her hope surging. Because Sam's words, her radio cry had pulled feds crashing in, their vans screeching up, agents spilling out. Hands off. Their orders cutting through, hauling Pike back, his baton clattering. And Vance's wiry frame flickered on a TV screen. No comment. His silver hair stark with panic, sweat trickling down his pale skin. And Renee thought, "We've got him." Her breath ragged, because the city's roar, her stand, meant justice years peeling back. A win carved from chaos, her fight breaking his grip at last. But Vance struck, his voice snarling over a hacked jail PA, a doctored clip of Renee. "I'm a terrorist, I'll destroy this place." Her confession, slick, fake, booming through the yard speakers, twisting her cry into guilt, and Renee's heart sank. He faked it. Her whisper lost as inmates froze, their fury flipping. "She's a liar," a stocky woman spat, fists turning on her, and the tide shifted, rioters storming her corner, a heavy fist slamming her cheek, blood streaming fresh down her chin. And she swung back. "It's not me." Her plea drowned by shouts, a boot cracking her ribs again, a sickening snap splitting the chaos, pain exploding white-hot, a gasp tearing from her throat as she hit the dust, and Vance's squad swarmed, his wiry frame looming on a grainy screen. "End her." His order a whip, guards piling on, fists pounding her back, ribs shattering anew under their blows. "Stay down." Pike's snarl a blade because his lie, his bomb threat, had flipped rebellion into ruin, his desperation turning allies into enemies, and the yard spun, smoke swirling from tear gas canisters, inmates scattering, their blood staining the concrete, a brutal hymn to a system he owned, and Renee curled tight, arms shielding her face, blows raining down, her elbow pulsing where it had broken before, because she'd broadcast truth, sparked. A riot, thought feds, might shatter Vance's grip, but his wrath roared fiercer, deadlier, twisting her stand into agony, and guards laughed. "You're done." Their boots kicking dust and Renee's gasps rasped, blood pooling beneath her, because 32 years of grit had taught her to rise, but this blow landed deepest. A war deepening against a judge who'd never let her breathe, a spark buried in torment yet not dead, because Vance's lie, the guards' fists, hadn't killed her fight. They'd fueled it, sharpened it for a battle he couldn't foresee. And when chaos cracks hope with a racist lie, how do you claw back from the edge? Comment number 1 if you're stunned. Vance turned Renee's riot into a bloodbath, hit that like button, and subscribe for more gritty stands against injustice. Let's keep pushing the truth. Now, picture her badge flashing again. Defiance. Blazing, will it break Vance's chains, or will his next move bury her deeper? Stay locked in, the fire's about to flare. The Chicago courthouse buzzed with a sharp midday chill as Renee Carter shuffled through its heavy oak doors, her orange jumpsuit patched with grime and clinging to the raw welts on her wrists, blood crusting her swollen lip from the jail riots. Brutal turn, her cracked ribs a jagged ache beneath her chest, her busted elbow pulsing under a shredded sling, and her steps faltered, chains clinking against the polished hardwood floor. Each sound a grim echo of Vance's lies, chaining her to 16 years stretched to decades by his forged terror charge, the air thick with the stale tang of wood polish and tension as she faced a retrial, a desperate bid to claw back her life from his racist grip. The courtroom swelled, a packed sea of faces stretching to the walls, reporters scribbling on pads, their pens scratching like restless ants, protesters' chants filtering through tall windows. Free Agent Carter, a restless hum shaking. The Glass and Dana, Renee's sister, stormed through the gallery, her lean frame clad in a navy blazer, her hands clutching Renee's USSS badge, its silver gleaming under the flickering fluorescence. "She's an agent." Her shout slicing. The din, thrusting it toward Judge Harold Vance, who smirked from the bench, his silver hair stark against his black robe, his pale gray eyes narrowing, caught mid-sneer as he'd mocked her defense. And Judge Ellis, a stern black woman with gray streaked hair and a robe that hung heavy, peered down, her dark eyes sharp. Testify, her order a hammer, because Dana's badge, Renee's blood, was a shield she'd never dared hope for, and Renee's chest tightened. Dana, her whisper trembling, because 32 years of grit met a sister's fire in this crucible of hate. Dana faced Ellis. "My sister's legit, check it." her voice a thunderclap, badge held high, and Renee's lawyer, Tate, a scrawny rookie with a mop of brown curls and a rumpled grey suit, stood beside her. Steadier now. Your Honor, she's Special Agent Carter, his plea firm cutting through the gallery's murmurs. And feds flanked the aisle, their navy jackets crisp, presenting charred bribe logs from Jamal's torched studio, edges blackened but legible. Payoffs, frame-ups, here's proof, an agent's voice sharp, a lifeline salvaged from the ashes, and Renee's heart leapt. It's working. Her hope surging, because Dana's badge, the feds' logs, were cracking Vance's wall, years teetering with every word, a wind shimmering beyond the chaos, her fight piercing his racist cage at last. Ellis nodded. Judge Vance, testify, her command iron, and Vance swaggered to the witness box, his wiry frame filling it, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses with bony fingers. She's legit. His voice tight, squirming under Ellis's. Gaze and Dana roared, You framed her! Her fists clenched, blood trickling from a grazed knuckle, and Tate pressed, He bribed Pratt. Torched evidence. His questions blades, slicing Vance's calm, and Vance faltered, sweat beading, his brow a lies all lies, his denial thin because Dana's fury, the badge, had jurors shifting. 12 tense faces in faded shirts and stiff collars wavering, doubt creasing their brows, and the gallery buzzed. He's guilty. A tide turning, because Jamal's logs, Dana's stand, were peeling back years, her badge's power shattering. His throne and Ellis leaned closer. Explain this. Her tone steel, and Renee thought, I'm free, her pulse racing, because truth was clawing through, acquittal looming beyond this gavel, a chance to reclaim her life from his hate. But Vance grinned, a predator's gleam flashing across his crooked teeth, slipping a note to a bailiff mid-trial, his whisper lost in the chaos, and minutes later, sirens wailed outside, a panicked voice booming over the PA. She confessed. Assaulted us. A fake video crackling through speakers. Renee's voice warped. I attacked them. Her admission slick, a desperate claw flipping the courtroom, and panic surged, jurors scrambling, benches toppling, reporters shouting, She's a fraud. Their pens dropping as fear swallowed truth, and Renee's stomach plummeted. No! Her cry raw, because Dana's badge, the feds' logs, were crumbling, and Vance barked, double her sentence, his order a gavel's echo, no vote, no pause, and Tate shouted, It's forged, his voice wobbling, file slipping as he flailed, but Ellis's frown deepened. Order, her gavel, crashing, swayed by the lie, and feds hesitated. Check it, an agent muttered, radios buzzing. Doubt creeping in, because Vance had bribed a juror, planted the video, turned justice into chaos, and bailiffs swarmed, yanking Renee up, chains clanking, her sling snapping loose, elbow jolting, pain searing white-hot, and Dana lunged. She's innocent. Her cry lost as guards hauled her back, and Vance smirked. Life now, his verdict a noose, because his lie, his bribe, had flipped her win, his desperation slamming her back into Max, and Tate slumped. We'll appeal, his mutter feeble, papers scattering, but Ellis barked, Take her, her order final, and Renee stumbled into the hall, chains rattling, the courtroom's oak doors slamming shut, a brutal hymn to a system he owned, and her badge's power, Dana's fight, dissolved, life looming, heavier than ever, a war deepening against a judge who'd never let her breathe, a spark buried in torment, yet not dead, because Vance's lie, the guard's grip, hadn't killed her fight. They'd fueled it, sharpened it for a battle he couldn't foresee. The Chicago dusk cast a heavy shroud over Dana Brooks's modest row house as Judge Harold Vance paced his shadowed chambers, his wiry frame taut beneath a wrinkled suit, sweat slicking his silver hair despite the chill seeping through cracked windows, his pale gray eyes glinting with a predator's desperation, his suspension a noose tightening after Renee's badge had cracked his empire in court, protesters still chanting beyond the courthouse, Justice for Renee, their drums. A relentless pulse he couldn't drown, and he gripped a burner phone, barking into it, Take out Dana Brooks tonight, his voice a low growl, because Renee's retrial, Dana's USSS badge flash, had fueled this war, and he'd lost too much, his gavel slipping, his power fraying. So he hired hitmen, a pair of lean shadows with scarred hands to bury her in her home, a knife to her throat because life in jail wasn't enough for Renee. He needed blood to crush this fight. In the jail's max security wing, Renee slumped against a cold steel bunk, her cracked ribs a jagged ache beneath her orange jumpsuit, soaked with sweat and patched with grime, blood crusting her swollen lip from the riot's brutal turn, her busted elbow pulsing under a shredded sling, the air thick with the sour tang of rust and despair, her chains clanking as she shifted. 16 years now, a life sentence under Vance's forged assault video, and a guard slipped a note through the slot. "Dana's in danger," scrawled in shaky ink, and Renee's breath caught. "Sis," her whisper trembling, because Dana's courtroom stand, her badge, had lit this battle, and now Vance's claws reached her, a shadow she'd never outrun, and Renee stood. "I'm breaking out," her plan a desperate flare, because 32 years of grit screamed to save her sister, even here, even broken. She scanned the cell, spotting a laundry cart rolling past, its wheels squeaking, a chance in the dark, and she pried at a loose vent grate, metal groaning as it gave, her ribs protesting with every twist, and she crawled, dust choking her lungs. Elbow jolting, pain searing, but she pushed, Dana's blood calling her, dropping into a service hall where a truck idled, and Renee hotwired it, her hands steady despite the ache, wires sparking as the engine coughed alive. "Move!" her shout urgent, because life meant nothing if Dana bled out, and she floored it, crashing a checkpoint gate, sirens blaring, bullets pinging off metal, ribs pulsing with every jolt, racing through Chicago's back roads, tires screeching on asphalt, sweat stinging her eyes. "Hold on, sis." Renee's vow fierce, because she'd thought Dana's badge might free her. Now, she'd save her life sentence be damned. The truck screeched into Dana's quiet street, dusk fading to night, abandoning it in an alley. Renee limping, her jumpsuit torn, blood seeping through the sling, slipping past a neighbor's fence, the tang of wet leaves sharp. Up Dana's. Porch steps, her door ajar, heart pounding as Renee peeked. Dana. Her whisper breaking, seeing Dana bound in her kitchen, a lean hitman with scarred hands pressing a knife to her throat, the blade glinting under a dim bulb, and Dana's navy blazer was crumpled, her eyes wide. "Renee!" Her gasp a lifeline, and Renee tackled him, her grazed elbow slamming his wrist, the knife slashing her arm, blood gushing hot as she roared. Pain exploding, and she pinned him. "Get off her!" Her cry raw, thinking Dana was safe. Her sister's pulse steady beneath her grip, a desperate stand carved from love and fury, because 32 years of surviving had taught her to fight. Even bleeding, even here. The hitman thrashed. "Vance owns you!" His snarl a blade, swinging the knife back, but Renee twisted, kicking his knee, bone crunching as he stumbled, the blade clattering, and she thought she'd won. Dana's ropes loosening, her sister's. Gasp free until boots pounded outside. Vance's squad bursting in. Crooked cops in black vests, guns blazing, bullets tearing plaster. And Renee dove down, her shout sharp, shoving Dana behind the counter, her arms searing as a shot ripped Dana's leg, crimson pooling fast, her scream slicing the night. "No!" Renee's cry breaking. Because she'd escaped, reached her, thought her fight might shield her sister, only for Vance's claws to strike fiercer, deadlier, turning rescue into carnage. Cops swarmed. "You're done," one barked, guns leveling, and Renee lunged, fists bloodying a cop's jaw, blood spraying as he reeled. But they piled on, knees pinning her, cuffs snapping tight, biting deeper into her raw wrists, drawing. A fresh trickle, and Vance loomed on a hacked TV feed, his wiry face smirking. Should have stayed caged. His taunt a slash of menace, his squad dragging Dana out, her leg bleeding, moaning, "Renee," her voice fading, and Renee thrashed. "Let her go." Her shout useless, ribs cracking anew under their blows, because Vance's hitmen, his cops, had flipped her stand into slaughter, and they hauled her off, chains clanking, Dana's blood staining her hands. "I'll get you." Renee's vow ragged, because 32 years of grit had taught her to rise. But this blow landed deepest, a war deepening against a judge who'd never let her breathe, a spark buried in torment yet not dead. Because Vance's guns, Dana's wound, hadn't killed her fight, they'd fueled it, sharpened it for a battle he couldn't foresee, and when a sister's blood spills under racist wrath, How do you hold on to hope? Comment number 1. If you're reeling from Vance turning Renee's rescue into a nightmare, hit that like button and subscribe for more raw tales of defiance against hate. Let's keep the fight alive. Now, envision a sniper's shot. In the dark, will Renee's fire burn through, or will Vance's next strike bury her for good? Stay glued, the heat's about to rise. The Chicago night cloaked Dana Brooks's modest row house in a suffocating stillness as Renee Carter crouched behind the kitchen counter, her cracked ribs screaming beneath her blood-soaked orange jumpsuit, the fabric patched with grime and clinging to the raw welts on her wrists, her busted elbow throbbing under a shredded sling, blood dripping from a slashed arm onto the chipped linoleum, mixing with Dana's crimson pool, her sister's leg a mangled mess from Vance's squad's gunfire, her shallow breaths rattling as Renee shielded her, pressing a drenched dishcloth to the wound. "Stay with me, sis," her voice a raw plea, because Dana's life, her fire, was bleeding out. A sister she'd fought to save now fading in her arms, and the stolen gun trembled in her free hand, its grip slick with sweat and blood. A desperate shield against the cops closing in, their black vests glinting under the kitchen's flickering bulb, the air thick with the acrid tang of gunpowder and the copper stench of despair. Bullets tearing plaster as Vance's ruthless ambush turned rescue into ruin, chaining her to a life sentence she'd never outrun. She fired, the gun bucking, rounds pinging off a fridge, clipping a cop's shoulder, crimson spraying as he yelped, "She's armed," his shout sharp, and Renee's ribs flared with every shot. "Back off," her cry fierce, hoarse, because 32 years of grit screamed to protect Dana, even here, even bleeding, and cops ducked returning fire, bullets shredding cabinets, glass shattering as she yanked Dana lower, her sister's groan faint. "Renee," her whisper, "say thread," and Renee thought they'd hold. Her stand, her gun might save her yet because she'd broken out, reached her, defied Vance's hitmen, a spark carved from love and fury in this hellish night. But chaos roared, cops pressing, a bullet grazing Renee's thigh, blood blooming hot, and she gritted her teeth. "Keep going," her defiance iron firing again, the gun clicking empty, and she scrambled, snatching a fallen knife from the hitman's clutch, slashing a cop's calf as he lunged, his howl sharp as he crumpled, blood pooling, and feds swarmed in, alerted by a neighbor's frantic call, their navy jackets a blur. "Drop your weapons," their shouts slicing the din, hauling cops back, cuffs snapping. "You're done," an agent barked, pinning the hitman, his scarred hands bruised from Renee's tackle, and Renee's chest heaved. "We made it." Her whisper breaking because Dana's pulse faint but there, and the feds meant rescue. Vance's empire cracking, a win she could taste through the copper in her mouth. 16 years, life, peeling back with every shout beyond the kitchen's wreckage, her fight breaking his grip at last. But a crack split the air, a sniper's shot from a rooftop perch, the bullet ripping through Renee's knee, a white-hot explosion shattering bone, dropping her limp beside Dana, blood pooling fast, her legs numb, her scream swallowed by pain. As it engulfed her, and Dana gasped, "No!" Her cry raw, lunging to cradle her sister, the knife clattering useless, her hands pressing Renee's wound. "Stay with me," her plea ragged. Because 32 years of sisterhood, their unbreakable bond teetered on this edge, and feds spun. Shooter high ground, guns swinging, firing at shadows, bullets pinging off steel. But the sniper vanished, a ghost in Vance's pay, his final card, and Renee's vision blurred. Dana, her voice fading, eyes fluttering because they'd fought, saved each other, thought feds would end it, and agents shouted, "Medic now!" Their kits clanking, dragging the hitman out. "Vance's orders!" His last snarl a chilling taunt, because her stand, her fire, had cracked Vance's grip, only for his sniper to strike fiercer, deadlier, turning victory into torment, and cops loomed. "She's still a threat," Pike's snarl. A whip stepping back as feds swarmed. "Clear," their order hollow as medics rushed Renee. Knees gone, critical, their voices sharp, lifting her onto a stretcher, blood dripping, her eyes locked on Dana's, a silent vow, and Dana staggered up. "My sister," her sob breaking, leg bleeding as medics pressed it. "She's alive." their urgency a blur, and Renee's gasps rasped, knee shattered, ribs pulsing. Because 32 years of grit had taught her to rise, but this blow landed deepest. Vance's hate a sniper's precision, burying her spark in agony, and the house settled, agents shouting, "Vance is behind this," radios buzzing, "Get him!" But he laughed from a hacked feed. "You're finished," his voice a ghost because he'd lost his squad. His hitmen thought chaos would bury her, and Renee's stretcher rolled. Her pulse weak, Dana's bed beside her, medics pressing her leg. She's fading, their haste a blur, and Renee's fingers twitched. Not yet, her vow a thread, because 32 years of grit had taught her to rise. But this blow landed deepest, a war deepening against a judge who'd never let her breathe. A spark buried in torment, yet not dead. Because Vance's sniper, Dana's blood, hadn't killed her fight. They'd fueled it, sharpened it for a battle he couldn't foresee. The Cook County Jail's maximum security wing clamped down on Renee Carter like a steel vice as she slumped in a cold, shadowed cell, her orange jumpsuit soaked with sweat and patched with grime, clinging to the raw welts on her wrists and the fresh bruises mottling her jaw from the sniper's aftermath, her cracked ribs a jagged ache beneath her chest, her shattered knee a numb void under a crude brace, blood crusting her swollen lip as the air hung thick with the sour tang of rust and the stale reek of despair, her chains clanking faintly against the concrete floor, 16 years now swollen to decades by Vance's forged escape plans, a brutal weight she'd never outrun. She'd been hauled back from Dana's bloodied kitchen, her wheelchair creaking under the guard's rough hands, her sister's fading pulse a haunting echo, and now Guard Pike loomed, a hulking figure with a shaved head and a jagged scar twisting. Down his cheek, his baton twirling as he growled, "Confess!" His voice a whip cracking through the cell's stillness, and Renee's jaw tightened, her deep brown eyes glinting with a fire that refused to die. "You've got nothing," her defiance sharp, because 32 years of grit had taught her to stand when the world crushed her, even here, even broken. But Pike smirked, "We'll see," his taunt a blade, slamming the baton across her. Knuckles, bones snapping with a sickening crunch, blood streaming hot down her fingers as pain flared white-hot, a scream tearing from her throat, and he pressed harder. "Say you planned it," his snarl relentless, because Vance's orders, stretched here, torture a tool to bury her spark, chaining her to a deeper hell with every blow. The cell spun, the bulb overhead flickering a sickly yellow, casting Pike's shadow long and warped across the gritty walls, and he struck again, the baton cracking her shin, a sharp snap splitting the silence, her gasps rasping as blood pooled. Beneath her, and two more guards flanked him, their boots scuffing the floor, pinning her arms, twisting her shattered fingers. "Talk," one barked, his voice a guttural echo, but Renee spat, "Never!" her refusal hoarse, a lifeline in the storm, because her badge, her fight, meant something even now, even bleeding. And Pike laughed, "Stubborn bitch," his baton raining blows on her ribs, each hit a thunderclap, shattering more bone, her vision blurring as pain engulfed her, and she thought feds might. Probe might crack Vance's web after Dana's shooting. A wind she could taste through the copper in her mouth, freedom shimmering beyond this torment, a spark she clung to despite the agony. But Vance struck deeper, his voice crackling over a hacked cell speaker. "She's plotting escape," his lie booming, a bribe to the warden flipping the script, and Pike grinned. "Got proof?" pulling a forged note from his pocket. Escape. Plans found it, his taunt a noose adding decades with a flick of his wrist, and Renee's stomach plummeted. "That's a lie," her cry raw, desperate, because her stand, her grit had sparked Fed raids, only for Vance's claws to tighten, piling years she didn't earn. And guards swarmed, chaining her tighter, cuffs biting deeper into her raw, wrists drawing fresh blood, and Pike loomed. "You'll break," his verdict iron. Because Vance's hate had twisted her fight into a deeper trap, racism's grip sinking crueler with every fabricated sin, a brutal lesson in how power could bury truth with a whisper. Then a shadow slipped through. Lila, a wiry inmate with grey braids and tired eyes, her jumpsuit patched at the elbows, shuffling close to Renee's bunk. "You're not alone." Her whisper soft, a lifeline in the dark, and she pressed a small recorder into Renee's palm. Its plastic scratched. "Expose him quick!" her hands trembling as she darted back, and Renee's chest swelled. "Thank you." Her gratitude raw, thumbing the record button, whispering, "Vance tortured me." Her voice a thread of hope, Dana's blood fueling. Her resolve, a chance to claw her way out from this abyss. But footsteps pounded, Pike charging in, his face twisted. "What's that?" Snatching the recorder as Lila spun. "It's mine!" Her lie bold, but Pike grabbed her, slamming her. Against the wall, baton raining blows. Her cry sharp as blood bloomed on her cheek, and Renee lunged. "Stop!" Her shout useless, chains yanking her back, her shattered knee buckling under her weight, and Pike smashed the recorder into shards, plastic crunching under his boot. "No proof, bitch!" His snarl a death knell. Kicking Lila's crumpled form, her whimpers fading as guards dragged her off, leaving Renee gasping in the dust, cheek pulsing, ribs screaming, fingers broken and bleeding, because she'd fought, carved a stand, thought Lila's gift might free her. But Vance's shadow stretched fiercer, deadlier, turning her spark into ash, and the cell's silence pressed down. Inmates retreating, the air thick with blood and loss. Because 32 years of grit had taught her to rise, but this blow landed deepest. A war deepening against a judge who'd never let her breathe. A spark buried in torment, yet not dead, because Pike's torture, Lila's blood, hadn't killed her fight. They'd fueled it, sharpened it for a battle he couldn't foresee. The Chicago dawn draped a bleak pallor over Cook County Jail as Renee Carter slumped in a creaky wheelchair, her orange jumpsuit soaked with sweat and patched with grime, clinging to the raw welts on her wrists and the fresh bruises mottling her jaw from Pike's relentless torture. Her cracked ribs a jagged ache beneath her chest, her shattered knee a numb void under a crude brace, blood crusting her swollen lip as her broken fingers throbbed, the air thick with the sour tang of rust and the stale reek of despair. Her chains, clanking faintly against the concrete floor. 16 years now, swollen to decades by Vance's forged escape plans, a brutal weight she'd never outrun. Across town, Judge Harold Vance paced his shadowed hideout, his wiry frame taut beneath a rumpled suit, sweat slicking his silver hair despite the chill of his unlit room, his pale grey eyes glinting with a predator's desperation, his suspension a noose tightening after the feds raided his empire, protesters still roaring beyond the courthouse, justice for Renee. Their chants a relentless drumbeat he couldn't silence, and he gripped a burner phone, barking into it, "Kill Dana Brooks now." His voice a low growl, because Renee's badge, Dana's courtroom defiance, had fueled this war, and he'd lost too much, his power fraying, so he hired a hitman, a gaunt shadow with a gaunt face and cold eyes, to bury her in the hospital, a bullet to her heart, because life in jail wasn't enough for Renee. He needed blood to end this fight. In her cell, Renee's wheelchair creaked as she gripped the arms, her sister's peril a fire in her gut, and a guard slipped a note through the slot. "Dana's hit," scrawled in shaky ink, and Renee's breath caught. "Sis," her whisper, trembling because Dana's stand, her voice, had lit this battle, and now Vance's claws reached her again, a shadow she'd never outrun, and Renee hissed, "I'm breaking out." Her plan a desperate ember, because 32 years of grit screamed to save her sister, even here, even crippled. She scanned the cell, spotting another laundry cart rolling past, its wheels groaning a chance in the gloom, and she pried at a loose panel with her unbroken hand, metal creaking as it gave, her ribs protesting with every twist, and she dragged herself through, dust choking her lungs, knee-dragging, pain searing, but she pushed, Dana's blood calling her, rolling into a service bay where a van idled, and Renee hotwired it, her hands steady despite the ache, wires sparking as the engines sputtered alive. "Move!" her shout, urgent because life meant nothing if Dana died, and she floored it, crashing a checkpoint gate, sirens blaring, bullets pinging off metal, ribs pulsing with every jolt, racing through Chicago's back roads, tires screeching on asphalt, sweat stinging her eyes. "Hold on, sis," Renee's vow fierce, because she'd thought Dana's fight might free her. Now she'd save her, life sentence be damned. The van screeched into the hospital lot, dawn breaking grey, abandoning it in a shadowed corner. Renee dragging herself out, wheelchair creaking, her jumpsuit torn, blood seeping through the brace, crawling past a dumpster, the tang of antiseptic sharp. Up a ramp, her door ajar, heart pounding as she peeked into Dana's room. Dana! Her whisper breaking, seeing Dana bound in her bed, a gaunt hitman with cold eyes pressing a gun to her neck, the barrel glinting under a dim fluorescent. And Dana's navy gown was crumpled, her eyes wide. Renee! Her gasp a lifeline, and Renee tackled him from the wheelchair, her slashed chest ripping open, blood gushing hot as she roared. Pain exploding, and she pinned him. Get off her! Her cry raw, thinking Dana was safe. Her sister's pulse steady beneath her grip, a desperate stand carved from love and fury because 32 years of surviving had taught her to fight, even bleeding, even here. The hitman thrashed. Vance owns you. His snarl a blade, swinging the gun back, but Renee twisted, stabbing the knife into his thigh, bone crunching as he stumbled, the gun clattering, and she thought she'd won, Dana's ropes loosening. Her sister's gasp free until boots pounded outside. Vance's squad bursting in, crooked cops in black vests, guns blazing, bullets tearing plaster, and Renee dove. Down! Her shout sharp, shoving Dana behind the bed, her chest searing as a shot ripped Dana's chest, crimson pooling fast, her scream slicing the dawn. No! Renee's cry breaking, because she'd escaped, reached her, thought her. Fight might shield her sister, only for Vance's claws to strike fiercer, deadlier, turning rescue into slaughter. Cops swarmed. You're done! One barked, guns leveling, and Renee lunged, fists bloodying a cop's jaw, blood spraying as he reeled, but they piled on, knees pinning her, cuffs snapping tight, biting deeper into her raw wrists, drawing. A fresh trickle, and Vance loomed on a hacked hospital feed, his wiry face smirking. Should have stayed locked, his taunt a slash of menace, his squad dragging Dana out, her chest bleeding, moaning, Renee! Her voice fading. And Renee thrashed, let her go. Her shout useless, ribs cracking anew under their blows. Because Vance's hitman, his cops, had flipped her stand into carnage, and they hauled her off, chains clanking, Dana's blood staining her hands. I'll get you, Renee's. Vow ragged, because 32 years of grit had taught her to rise, but this blow landed deepest. A war deepening against a judge who'd never let her breathe. A spark buried in torment, yet not dead, because Vance's guns, Dana's wound, hadn't killed her fight. They'd fueled it, sharpened it for a battle he couldn't foresee. The Chicago hospital's sterile hum wrapped around Renee Carter as she jolted awake in a stiff bed, her shattered knee a numb void below a heavy cast, legs lifeless under a thin gown clinging to her sweat-damp skin, her cracked ribs a jagged, ache beneath fresh bandages, blood crusting her swollen lip, and the air pulsed with the sharp tang of antiseptic and the faint drone of monitors beeping, their green lines spiking erratically, casting a pallid glow across her bruised face, while Nia sat beside her, her own orange jumpsuit replaced by a gown, ribs a throbbing cage, her deep brown eyes glinting with a fire unquenched, and Dana lay in the next bed, her chest swathed in gauze, breath shallow but steady, alive despite the bullet's tear, and Fed swarmed the room, their navy jackets rustling, an agent muttering, Vance is locked, his voice sharp, because the sniper, the hitman, had cracked his empire, and Renee's chest tightened. We survived. Her whisper trembling, because 32 years of grit, their desperate stand, had pulled them through, 16 years stretched to life teetering, freedom shimmering in the chaos. The TV flared, Vance on screen, cuffed in a precinct hall, his wiry frame slumped, his silver hair stark under harsh lights. Crooked judge jailed, an anchor's voice booming, and Chicago erupted, protests morphing to cheers beyond the hospital's glass. Justice prevails, a tide washing away years, but a bombshell crashed. Dana stirred, her hands clutching a hidden locket, trembling as she locked eyes with Renee. Your son's alive. Her tone steady, a storm breaking, and Nia frowned. Jamal, her voice soft, wary, because 16 years ago they'd mourned him. A toddler lost in a raid, a grief they'd carried like a wound, and Dana nodded. He's a cop. Her revelation a thunderclap. revealing Jamal Carter had joined undercover to expose Vance, a secret buried deep, and now exposed, and Renee's breath hitched. He's out there, her realization bitter, because 32 years of grit had forged this family, only to crack it open with this truth, a shadow deeper than Vance's hate. Feds pounced. "We'll track him," an agent barked, radios buzzing, but the screen flared again. "Prison riot at max. Vance escaped," the anchor's voice sharp, cutting through their fragile win, and Renee's blood chilled. No, her cry raw because life had loomed, freedom had bloomed, only for Vance to slip free, his last words on a hacked feed echoing, "Your son's next," a taunt aimed at Jamal, a rookie unseen, alive, and Dana paled. "He knows Jamal's his mole," her whisper haunted, eyes darting to Renee because 16 years ago she'd hidden him, shielded him from Vance's wrath after the raid, never dreaming his reach could stretch this far. And now his escape turned it loose, a ghost unburied, and Nia's fists clenched. "What's he got?" her demand ablaze, because their fight, their blood had freed them only to birth this. A war reborn in a son's shadow, and Fed scrambled. "He's armed, lethal," their urgency a blur, but the hospital pulsed, colder, darker, because Renee's knee, Dana's chest were prices paid, a win snatched, and Vance's flight flipped it, his knowledge a noose tightening, and Dana sank. "I thought he was safe," her voice trembling, because she'd raised Jamal, fought for Renee, thought this was the end, but his life, Vance's escape, turned victory to ash, and Renee wheeled closer. "We'll save him," her vow fierce, her fight reborn. Because Vance's hate, his sniper, had crippled her, but not her spirit. And the room hummed, monitors beeping, feds shouting, "Lock it down," their orders sharp, and Nia gripped her hand. "He's ours." Her eyes wet, because she'd mourned Jamal, shielded. Dinah thought this war was won, but Vance's shadow stretched cruelest, deadliest, and Renee stared. "He's not done," her voice hollow, because 32 years of grit had taught her to rise. But this twist landed heaviest, a son lost, now found, a threat unburied in a judge's flight, a war deepening beyond these walls, a spark blazing anew against a foe who'd never let them rest. Renee Carter's grueling odyssey through Chicago's corrupt courts teaches us that justice is a treacherous climb, not a right, forged through blood and defiance against relentless racial hate. From Vance's sneering dismissal to a sniper's bullet shattering her knee, her saga exposes how prejudice turns authority into a weapon, with forged charges, tampered evidence, and brutal torture burying her black voice despite her USSS badge. Every stand, protests, jailbreaks, a sister's plea, shows resilience isn't just enduring. It's fighting when ribs crack, when kin bleed, when hope burns out. Dana's badge, Jamal's secret, reveal family as both shield and target, crushed by Vance's ruthless claw, a lesson in how racism escalates, striking deadlier with every crack it faces. His escape, Jamal's unburied life, prove evil doesn't yield, it twists, hitting harder when cornered. 16 years ballooning to life, a son's safety, now a noose. Renee's fight screams that justice demands more than one soul. It needs, roar like Chicago's protests, to break corruption's hold, because a badge means nothing when hate owns the bench. Her wheelchair vow, Nia's grit, show change begins with those who rise, even broken, against a system thriving on silence, a war that never rests. When a son's shadow turns triumph to terror, what fuels your fight? Comment. Number 1. If Renee's unbreakable spirit sparks your stand against injustice, like, subscribe, and share to amplify this battle. Your voice can shift the tide. Thanks for joining us on this raw ride. Your support lights the way to truth. Here's wishing you the courage to face your own Vances. May you stand tall, unyielding always.